are many roads and many different types of roads that we will travel. There are intersections that will be of convergence. There will be divided highways of opinions and values, on and off ramps, and we are most certainly inevitable to meet a fork in the road. I'm going to talk about my story. It may have been the most pivotal point in my professional career. I had taken a position with an agency that was plagued from corruption and wrongdoing, and they were in great need of rebranding. At the time, I had just recently expanded my family, and so they were equally dependent upon my success. I would have to prove myself to a leadership that was new in their role, to include a board of county commissioners. I had nearly 100 employees. Many of them were disgruntled at the time. So the simple thought of failure haunted me. I didn't realize the severity of road conditions that I would be facing, nor did I completely understand the level of accountability for which I was about to be held. I mean, after all, it was a public safety issue. In fact, some would argue it was the difference between life and death, because at times, emergency service providers couldn't tend to their calls. Children couldn't get to and from school, which had a direct impact on the economic vitality, for then their parents couldn't get to their place of employment. The community was outraged, and their patience and their trust had all but run out, and rightfully so. And the employees that were responsible for maintaining these roads, they couldn't support their own children at school functions, for they would be crowded around. They would be blamed, and things would be demanded of them for which they were in no position to commit to. They couldn't go to the local grocery store, because often the clerk at the checkout, who was part of that community, would criticize them in front of their own family. They couldn't escape the problems at work, not even in their personal lives. All eyes were on me. The employees were looking to me for guidance, for direction, to ensure that they had the resources they needed to do their jobs effectively, and to shield them from this community. And the leadership was looking to me for a plan, to organize, to develop strategies, and to implement them quickly with real and lasting results. And the community, well, they just wanted somebody to blame, somebody to point their finger at, and I was their guy. And despite the fact that I hadn't been in my position for very long, or that the problems with the roadways was decades in the making, likely from the corruption, or even the fact that the problems that the community had wasn't just isolated to their area. It was widespread across the entire gravel road network. We were one of the fastest growing communities in the state. We had more gravel roads than the majority of all agencies of our size around us. With over 1,600 lane miles, we had a tall order. 90% of that network was considered to be in a failed state. I started off with virtually no resources. I had $50,000 a year. It might as well have been nothing. And staff at the time had no current or modern training on how to properly maintain roads, let alone how to rebuild them. Because honestly, we were so past maintenance, we were in the reconstruct state. My fleet, it was in complete disrepair. It was limping at best to perform. There was no documentation of the histories or any plans for the future. I was starting from scratch. But I knew that I had to take this negative and I had to turn it into something positive, and that my professional reputation was likely on the line. So I would turn to innovation. Innovation often requires of us to get off the beaten path, to intentionally get lost in new ideas, to seek out new solutions, and hopefully find a renewed vision and direction. But so oftenly, the ruts in the road that we find ourselves trapped in is an indication the direction we've been traveling, we have traveled far too long. And that foundation has begun to fail us. And that failure that we so desperately try to avoid is actually part of the prerequisite of success. It's the trial and error that's part of the story. And I would actually say that it is the story. Why is it that in private sector, innovation is rewarded, it's celebrated, and we so patiently anticipate it? I mean, we will stand and gather in long lines, we will travel great distances, and when we arrive, we will pay. Hell, we will even overpay for that innovation. And when it doesn't deliver all that we had hoped, sure, we might be upset. We might even be a little pissed off and write a bad review. But what we don't find ourselves doing is calling up the inventor, marching down to their front door, banging on it, and saying, why isn't this new shiny thing great? No, because we know just right around the corner is more innovation. There'll be a new system, a new version that we will pay for again and again. And we do this repeatedly, but more importantly, we do this willingly. Yet in public sector innovation, often internally it's discouraged, it's denied, or it's even thought of as unnecessary, even though a lot of agencies claim to be an agent of change or in the mode of continuous improvement. And sometimes the public sector innovators that are there to help, or the private sector, innovators that are there to help the public sector will challenge our innovation. Specifically if it's not what they're offering. They feel some sense of entitlement or control to put a bubble around what they're doing, to prevent competition and to monopolize it. And when there is mistakes or failure in public sector innovation, we as a taxpayer feel ripped off, somehow wronged. Even though in the back of our mind we know that trial and error and failure is just the part of the process for improvement and innovation and success. And so I would say that even when you're comparing private sector innovation with public sector innovation, they don't even really line up. I mean, you can get in your car, drive down the road, and buy that new shiny thing. You can wake up in the morning, get ready to use that new shiny thing because you have fresh running water. And so public sector innovation is what truly separates us and makes us a modern and developed society, which brings me back to the roads. I knew that I had to take a negative and I had to drive it into something positive. And with the understanding that gravel roads have half the lifespan of their counterpart, the paved road, we also were faced with the fact that unlike any other agency in the Front Range, we were buying water from private property owners. And they were part of the outraged community, so those were pretty interesting transactions at best. And the materials that are required to rebuild roads, they were a long, long ways away. And the level of effort to get it to those roads was of significance. So there was many, many other hurdles of which I don't have time to get into today, but I can tell you whatever it was that we were going to do, we had to target these eco-efficiencies. Eco-efficiencies is not a commonly used buzzword, but in the government world, we live and breathe it every single day. Eco-efficiencies. To do more with less. Sometimes it means to pay less and expect nothing but the best. And we're supposed to wear this as a badge of honor. And oftentimes it can be, but so often I also see that we neglect our bare minimum necessities in order to achieve that. So, with my engineering and chemistry background, I would focus on something to target these eco-efficiencies. And what I would look at would be materials. And what I was looking at is an old system. It's a system that's all around us. It's likely in this room right now. And its sole purpose is to take materials to enhance the performance, increase the lifespan, to make things stable, and more importantly, to allow you the opportunity to use less of something. This little shiny nugget that I'm talking about is polymer. Now, we didn't create polymer. We didn't invent polymer. There are many types, many vendors. But what we did see was an opportunity. And so, realizing again that gravel roads have half the lifespan, it was understood that when we were standing at the starting line to implement our improvements, that it likely wouldn't be long before we turn around and realize that all of the investment, all of the effort would begin to fail long before we even crossed the finish line. So we needed something to give us more operating capacity. And polymer was just the tool for the job. And not to say that anything or everything was wrong with what had been done in the past, that the people, the systems, the materials, but what we knew was the ruts in the road was an indication we had traveled that direction far too long, we had relied on it far too long, and in by itself was not a solution. And so through implementing polymer, we were able to stabilize our improvements. It's kind of like the car tire. If you think about gravel roads, they're never as new as the day that you put them on. The second you drive off and start putting miles on them, they begin to degrade. Infrastructure is the same way. The question is, how often are you going to rotate? So coming back to the use of polymer, again, we did not create the polymer. We did not invent the polymer. What we did is trial and error and failure, and we built upon that system and ultimately found something that worked. And through that, we were nominated for 2 national awards. We've garnered international attention. We have employees that are some of the best in the industry, highly sought after, technical road stabilizers. So there will always be the monopolies. There will always be the opposers, the challengers, the naysayers, and the boohooers in the crowd cheering us on. That's public service, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing that we can do about that. But what we can do is meet ourselves in the middle of the road and look back across our journey where we once purposefully got lost in search of new ideas, where we have found a new direction, and hopefully we could recover from the corrupted ruts that we once stood in, and that we could, in fact, rebrand ourselves as succeeders, as innovators, as front runners. That's innovation in a common place. And to achieve the seemingly impossible requires trial and error, learning from our mistakes, becoming better. And that success is not about winning the race. It's actually about moving on to the next challenge, succeeded from the previous. And that staying in the race, that's success. And I never thought that this would have such a profound impact on me personally and professionally. All the challenge, all of the urgency, all the opposition internally and externally, but also all of the success and the pride and the elevated levels of expectation and maintaining that. And fortunately, I had a leadership and a board of county commissioners that led from the back and supported from the front. And that an agency such as Adams County truly lives its values and the value of becoming one of the most innovative agencies in the country. And never in a million years did I believe that rebuilding dirt roads would actually mean reinventing myself and finding a new purpose. Now that was innovation in a less common place. Thank you.